or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host Rafael and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Rafael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Dr. Albert, thank you so much for being on the Coaching Call. How are you this morning?
I'm excellent, Sifu. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm very excited for this interview, actually, more like a conversation, if you will, because I want to get to know you a lot deeper, a lot more. So I'd love to start. This is the way I get to know people a little bit. Where were you born? And then the other question on that one is, who influenced you even before the age of 10?
Well, I would say I was born in New Jersey, born and raised Elizabeth, New Jersey. Now I live in Linden, New Jersey, my whole life. The person I think had the biggest influence on me as a child was my paternal grandmother, on my father's side, father's mother. I would say for the first, most of my childhood life, she was one that kind of believed in me, encouraged me to succeed and to move forward. So she was like my major influence.
Nice. So New Jersey, are you still in the area?
Yes. Yeah, I spend some time here, and then I also go to North Carolina too. The Outer Banks area. So I spend a little bit of time, usually like 4 months in North Carolina, 8 months here. So
Yes. So interesting. I'm in New York, right? So we're basically neighbors.
yes. Yeah, my agency office is actually in Manhattan.
Okay, very cool. So, and we're going to get into the agency stuff and everything else. I just want to know about your childhood. Tell me about growing up. Tell me about the kind of friends that you ran around with, or the schooling that you went to. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I was kind of a different type of a child. I was born into a family with four. I have three brothers, one sister, so there were five of us.
Right.
I'm the baby. And I was a different child. So most of my brothers and my father were all into sports, like football, baseball. And my father was a football coach. My oldest brother was a football coach. So they were very much into sports, like lived, leads, slept sports. For me, I had no interest in sports.
Gotcha.
I had zero ability, zero prowess when it comes to sports. I just didn't want to do it. For me, I love to read.
Gotcha. So what did you occupy your time with besides reading, right? Were you very scholarly, or did you play
Yeah,
video
very
games?
scholarly. I was a thinker, I still am, but that was like what I was branded as, both by my teachers, by my family, because that's all I really did. Most of my childhood was read, go to school, read, so I was very much a bookworm. And when I was a teenager, I was reading books that probably most 16-year-olds, 15, 16-year-olds weren't reading, such as like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, or 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, or Feeling Good by David Burns, which is a primary cognitive behavioral therapy. Again, not typical reading for a teenager. So usually when it came down for study hall, I often got a lot of looks, not from just others, kids, but even from the teachers, like, well, what are you doing reading that? Sort of a thing.
That's interesting. Those are great books, by the way, that you just mentioned. What would you say was your favorite book that you've ever read? And maybe you've read more than once.
Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom, are like the top of my list.
Gotcha. So you were a bookworm. Obviously, you still are.
Yes.
And so how fast did you read? Because I have friends of mine who are great bookworms. Some of them read really fast. Some of them read slow. Some of them read out loud. So what kind of a reader are you?
I would say I'm a medium. I wouldn't say I'm slow, but I wouldn't say I'm fast.
Gotcha.
It also depends on the tone and the style of the book. Sometimes I can get through a book in, one or two sittings if it's like really engaging. Other times it takes me a little while to get through it, especially if it's a dense book where there's a lot of information and that I need to really just get to really digest the information. It can take, days and, sometimes. It really depends on the book.
Of course, of course. So it sounded to me like you were reading kind of self-help books and books to, nonfiction books. Did you also read fiction books?
A little bit, not much. I read, when I was growing up, one of my childhood books that I liked was like Magic Garden, Secret Garden. But I also enjoyed a little bit of Stephen King, James Patterson. Now I've been reading some of his, Alex Cross books and other detective books. So that was like maybe my foreign fiction, but I would say I'm 90% nonfiction with a slight mix of fiction.
Gotcha, gotcha. So when you think about, you said that you got some looks from not only your fellow students but the teachers as well. Did anybody question the kind of books you were reading? Like, did a teacher take interest in because you were reading certain books?
A few. I didn't get that many. Maybe silently. Who knows what they were saying behind closed doors? I don't know.
Right.
I'm not privy to that. But I think a few times I would get like, "Oh, that's interesting. What made you want to read that?" Or, "Do you really understand that?"
Mm.
And of course, I would come back and say, "Yeah," and I would come back with a really eloquent explanation, and they would be shocked.
Nice, nice, nice. What was did you have many friends in school? Did you belong to a book club back then?
I had acquaintances. I was never the type of person that I was never bullied, thankfully,
Mhm.
significantly. I had a lot of acquaintances that were fairly popular. I didn't really have that many friends because I really didn't know how to relate to kids my age because being the youngest of five, I kind of grew up as, the pseudo adult where I would hang out with all the adults,
Mm.
for like most of my peers would be hanging out with their friends. I'd be hanging out with the teachers. I'd be, at family events. I'd be at the adults table,
Right.
having a conversation like adults. I was very much ahead of my years, and so I really didn't know how to identify things. But to answer your question, when I was definitely in high school and college, I was involved in so many organizations. We
Mm.
really didn't have book clubs, but like service organizations, debate club, drama club, all
Mm.
of that stuff. Kind of, I was involved in community service, Kiwanis Club, Key Club, Rotary Club, all those types of organizations I was part of. So I was very active in extracurricular activities in high school and college.
That's incredible. Talk to me about, obviously, because I think the drama club probably had a big influence on your life. Uh, Talk to me about that, and how did you even get into it? What was the moment that you said, "I need to belong to this club"?
I was like at the point where I was checking out every club. When I was in high school, I was like, let me just check this out, and I just felt so at home, and it's going to lead to later on because just being around, these students that were mainly, theater oriented or theater interested were really what gave me fuel and where I felt I really belonged and felt seen, I
Mm.
think.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then even in college when I took some acting classes and I helped out and did some volunteer work at setting up the plays and all of that, and just so I was hanging out with a lot of theater kids in college, and I think I just identified more with that, that archetype and that peer group more than I did with other peers. So I definitely kind of started. It didn't really click, but I realized I fit in more with those types of people like the theater and creative types, than I did with other kids my own age. Because again, I had zero interest or really prowess and abilities. Like I couldn't necessarily really do well in sports. I mean, because my family, of course, being that I'm a male, my father and brothers tried to suit me up in football gear and baseball gear, put a bat, or a glove, or put a helmet on me. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. I had no interest or really the ability to do it, or the patience, that was really required. Because initially, of course, being in a traditional male family, they wanted to toughen me up, quote unquote, toughen me up, which I can understand. This is in the 80s, so it's a little different now. I just couldn't do it. I had no interest in it. And one story that I was told, I don't remember this consciously, but my father couldn't figure out why I wasn't interested in it, because I kept saying I don't want to do this. And I think my father said, well, what do you want to do? And I turned around and said, I said to him, and this is what I was told: I don't want to play on the team. I want to own the team.
Ah, there you go.
and that kind of, I think, from that moment on, no longer did they try to convince me at this point, to play sports. I think that was kind of like loud. They heard it loud and clear.
That's pretty well. Ambition, right? Even at that young age, thinking, I don't want to play. I want to own the team, and basically almost tell them what to do.
Exactly.
Did you ever consider coaching because of that statement?
Well, I mean, later on, I don't. Obviously, I'm more of a conservative, more of a mindset than because I have no, athletic prowess, but there is, as you know, a strong mental component to sports and athletic performance, and so I can definitely be qualified to do that. Like the
strategy and so forth, right?
Yeah. Well, your mindset, your how your self-image, all that plays a role into your performance on the field.
Correct. So in college, you're hanging out, and you call them archetypes, right? Tell us what does that, because I have a communication school, so we do go into archetypes of different voices and different venues that we take. What did you mean by that?
I guess what I mean more is like structured personality types, certain interests, hobbies, pain points, strong points, and each group has their own individual things. Like, the athletes have their own, they have their own archetype, their own specific way of relating to people, their own specific way of doing things with people.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. When you were doing the drama and the theater and so forth, what was your favorite part of it?
Yeah. I mean, I think just telling the story was number one, and watching it, was more of a thing, and just watching it happen and watching people lighten up. And I think what I liked about it, that with, at least with the peer group, and I think this is probably the biggest reason, was there was no judgment. And I felt like, okay, this is where I really feel seen and heard.
Nice.
Not just as a performer, but as a person, as a human being. And I think that's sort of like why I identify mainly with actors and creatives, because of that reason.
Yeah. Awesome. So you did you pursue the stage? Did you pursue behind the scenes, in front of the camera? What was it for you?
Not initially. When I was in high school, because of all the reading, by the end of my sophomore year, I declared I was going to be a psych major and, psychology, because I was determined to be a clinical psychologist and professor. And that was like my one track goal. So I said, this is fun. I think I had the whole notion for a while. This is fun, but this is not a career. And so that's where I sort of went with the idea of where I'm just gonna, this is a hobby. This is a fun hobby, for me at the time. And it wasn't until later on that, after graduation, after receiving my master's degree, that I started to realize that there may be something to this, because I found myself, after receiving a master's degree, it was right around the time of 9/11, September
Mm.
11th. And some of my contacts were, from grad school were asking everyone to help out on the ground in New York City, like to volunteer,
Right.
to do some crisis intervention, counseling, advocacy. So it started that, surprisingly, I found myself alongside of filmmakers, actors, activists, volunteers, people that worked in the film industry, people that were actors, work in the arts industries. And I had someone approach me and said, I would like you to audition for my movie.
Mm.
Okay. I remember, I took acting classes in college. I'm not considered, an actor, but okay. And I was like, wait a second, I want to do more of this.
Mm.
I want to do more. So I did a little bit of pursuing as an actor initially. This is around 2002, 2003, 2004.
Right.
I said, you know what, I'm going to try being an actor. Got headshots. I, was doing the daily things as an actor. And I was in a couple of independent films, some local commercials. And what I found, though, what kind of brought back, I started like not necessarily being in front of the camera, but I enjoyed being on set.
Mm.
I enjoyed being around actors. And you would see me, what I found myself doing a lot of times was cutting out casting calls and handing them out to actors that I knew on set and be like, you'd be great for this, you'd be great for that, you should apply to this. And then two people had actually told me, like, you'd make a great agent.
Mm.
And I'm like, ah. At that time it was like, yeah, and then but the wheels were turning.
Right. Right. They started.
So I was like, it's time, and then I realized, quickly into this, this was not for me, being in front of the camera, being in life of an actor. I had a full-time job at the time. I was teaching, started to teach part-time. So I really didn't have time. I didn't have the business framework or mindset to be an actor, but I enjoyed being around actors.
Right.
So let me find a way where I can support actors. And I did a little soul searching, where am I going to, where do I fit in, with that? And then I realized, what, I'm going to advocate and represent them. And so late 2004, I started my first company.
Mm.
And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur as well, even though, because I'm the type of person where I work well with people, but I'm not the type that likes working for people.
Gotcha. Yeah. So let me ask you a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Thank you for sharing all that.
Of course.
Where were you when 9/11 happened?
Well, I was home in New Jersey. I remember watching TV in the morning and then seeing that the first plane hit, and thought, like everybody else did, oh, this was an accident,
Mm.
a plane crash. Okay. Unfortunate, but it was an accident.
Right.
And of course, as everybody soon discovered, when the second plane hit, this was no accident. And then I had what was interesting is I was at a family wedding 4 days before the Twin Towers had fell down, and it was in Jersey City, the venue, and it was right across the river. So I remember sitting and staring for like a half an hour in awe of the Twin Towers.
Right.
And now I think I was watching, just like the other millions of people in horror, watching them come down.
Right.
Because I saw it live on TV as they came down.
Yeah. I was in Long Island myself, and I watched them come down as well.
Yeah. And I remember actually, like, literally getting my eyes welling up with tears watching that happen. Because not only was, that's a New York icon, but I also knew that there were a lot of people in there,
Yeah.
That were trapped. And that's what I think really, got me to react such in a visceral and emotional way.
Right. Yeah. It was a very interesting day for sure. I didn't know it at the time, but my sister was there, and she was actually helping people while she was there. She was there when it happened, so she was able to get out and safely,
Good.
but she was helping people as well. So the other question I have for you is, when you realized that helping actors was your calling, you said you had a job, or you were teaching. What were you teaching?
Well, I still teach now, but I was teaching at a community college psychology.
Okay.
I before that, I was doing a lot of 9/11 related work. I worked for American Red Cross, and then I worked for a hotline that was set up for New York City called 1-800-LifeNet. And that was dealing with a lot of the aftermath of 9/11, people needing services, whether it's entitlement services like medical expenses, or even just someone to talk to.
Mm.
And I did that for a year. That was a grant funded position. I enjoyed it. It was definitely rewarding. And then, I was laid off because the grant money had ended for that position. So that was there for about a year, at 1-800-LifeNet. And then I moved to, then I was, kind of working for a job, and then I got hired to teach part time. This was during this time where I said, what, I'm going to go, let me open up my company now. I had a little bit of time. I didn't know what it was going to stand, how this was going to go, so I then made the decision to add more to my plate. But I was like, I'm going to go back for my PhD now and
Yes.
just really, kind of finish it, go full circle. I always wanted a PhD, and I was like kind of halfway there with a master's. So I was like, let me just complete it now, because I
Yeah.
didn't know what was going to happen, the uncertainty. And I wanted an insurance policy, to actually have a degree. And also what was significant was I was the first person in my family to go to graduate, not only graduate from college, but to get a PhD.
Oh,
So
that's
it was a significant moment for me.
mhm. Yeah. When was that?
To I well, I went. It took me a little bit longer, but I finished my PhD in 2015. So
Oh,
10 years ago, I
nice.
graduated with that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Like for most people, and like you said, they stop at a certain point. So even like my sisters, they have PhDs and so forth. And one of my sisters was just about to get hers, and then she took a year off. I was like, "Oh, you gotta finish. You gotta go for it."
It's challenging, because I can see why people do that. I mean, for me, and I'm sure, from a lot of PhDs that I've talked to, it's not the coursework that's difficult; it's a dissertation
Right.
that is rough. And I didn't really realize that until I was like knee deep in it. Because I excel through my coursework, because again, the thinker in me,
Mm,
was really doing research papers, course papers was absolutely amazing for me.
mm.
I
Yes.
enjoyed it immensely,
Yeah. Right.
writing all these papers. And I thought, okay, well, the dissertation is going to be fun for me, and it was initially in the beginning, until, it was all these revisions and all these back and forth that was like really getting under my skin.
Mm,
And when I was when I started a PhD, I had a relatively fewer obligations. In the middle of this all, I was hired, where I was teaching at the time, full time,
mm.
which was an amazing honor. You
Right.
know, tenure track, assistant professor at a community college. This is great, but I didn't realize that there was going to be so much more work involved when you're full time versus part time. Because typically, when you're a part time professor, you just come in and you teach your classes and you leave, and that's it.
Right.
When you're full time, not only you have to have office hours, you have to do a lot of projects and committees for the college.
Mm,
So there's a lot more extra time involved
mm.
in there than just teaching classes and leaving. So, in addition to just running a business, it was challenging.
Mhm. Yeah, because bigger commitments, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you talked about you opened up your first business. Tell us where you opened it. Did you do it out of your house? Did you rent a place? What was that like?
In the beginning, I just ran out of my house, for the first few years. Um, and I think around 2000, late 2007, in my town in Linden, New Jersey, there was a lawyer who was looking for an extra person to share an office with, share one of his offices. So I took that, and I was there for about 7 years, and I operated the agency there in an office. I wanted it to be more professional because, it wasn't a good look to say, hey, actor A, come to my house, for a meeting. Wasn't exactly, especially being, especially if it was an actress, for security reasons, it wasn't a very good look. So I was often would find myself like meeting with actors in Starbucks in New York City or something like that.
Mm.
Wanted a more central location. Now I did for a while in New Jersey, which worked okay. It gave me a little bit of legitimacy. But then in 2014, I said, you know what, I really have to move into the city, into Manhattan. And that was a challenge too, a little bit of juggling I had to do to find affordable rent because
It's crazy,
most of the place, I'd say 95% of the places I looked at, when, they told me that rent, I was like, there's no way I can afford that. So I found myself, getting a private office, and I still do, in co-working spaces. And that was a little bit cheaper, more economical for me. So 2014, I moved to a company called Regis, which does like short term, short and long term.
Regis is great. Regis is great. Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it. Now I'm at WeWork.
Okay.
Which is similar to Regis, very similar structure to Regis. But I enjoyed being in the, I had my own private office. But I will tell you, the legitimacy of being in New York City, having a New York City address as a talent agent, made a huge difference, in the credibility and the game changing work. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because since COVID, I've been less and less in the office, but working a lot remotely or from home.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, because a lot of actors are now um, probably even doing interviews online, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, from like the good part of our year, especially from 2020 to 2021, early 20, everything was on Zoom. Everything, like we had meetings, we had, interviews, actors were auditioning on Zoom and sending in self tapes. So, and nowadays, there's still most of the auditions an actor is going to do is going to be virtual, not real, not in person. Because prior to 2020, if you wanted to be an actor in New York City or New York, you had to live near New York or be in New York because there were auditions all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, interesting. So you, how did you break into? You told somebody, hey, I think you're good for this part. You're good for that part. How did the industry accept you? How did you didn't they didn't know who you were? How did you
Well,
finagle that?
yeah, I mean that was something I didn't really budget in, and might have been a more of a, be honestly, maybe not a properly planned thing, because most people when they work, at least as an agent, what they do is they start off, working as a, an assistant or an intern,
Mhm.
at a New York agency. Then they work their way up to junior agent, to maybe, a full-time agent, and then they break off on their own, after a few years. It's like
Right.
similar like a real estate, person would do, or a real estate agent would do. I just decided I'm going to go right into this do it all alone.
Yeah.
It took a while. It took social proof. I need to really demonstrate that I know what I'm doing.
Right.
And also I had to kind of break through the traditional, I almost want to say like a fraternity and sorority like structure, where it was like, okay, there were these old time, timers, and really the in club, like you had to really be in the know. And it took me a while to break into that. And I think what started happening was like I would send, they would call in an actor they knew, and the actor would book the role.
Right.
And eventually, I think they started to see, okay, well, this guy represents some good people. Let's give him some more appointments. Let's
Nice.
give him some more time. But that took years to cultivate. A lot of times, these relationships.
Mm-hmm. What was your big break, would you say?
So 2013, I found myself in a dire situation. So I was in a tenure track position. I found that I wasn't getting tenure, which meant, and now I had to, I was on a crossroads here because I was still a PhD student. Do I look for another teaching job, or do I double down now and really focus on the agency? Because I'll be honest with you, when I was working full time, I still had the agency. It wasn't doing well because I didn't have enough time to devote to it. I just simply didn't, and I didn't really have the resources to hire someone to take over for me. So it wasn't doing very well. Now I was like, okay, well, I have a chance now to either make it or break it. So I started doubling down really heavily. And the one thing which is going to lead to mindset, which is I started acting as if I was a professional agent.
There you go. That's the way to do it.
And that I have dedicated. I can tell you, straight up that's what worked.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to meet with actors, and maybe if this happened about a month before the biggest break, I started telling people, yeah, I book people in primetime TV. I have clients working in primetime TV. It was a little bit of a white lie, but, at the time. But I was like, yeah. And I started acting, like that and speaking that out into existence. And then in late April, there happened to be a role on SVU, Law and Order SVU. They were looking for a client who was a theater performer who was masculine but liked to dress in drag. And I happened to have
that person,
a client who did that, and sent them in, and they booked the role. So, that was my biggest break, because it was a primetime guest star on SVU, and so that was real. And then about a week later, I had booked someone on, a show called Royal Pains, and then another person on Law and Order SVU, another episode. So it was like 3 TV bookings in less than 2 weeks.
Nice.
So that was like, okay, now I feel like an agent.
Yeah. No more pretending.
Now I can really say I'm an agent.
Right.
And though then everything just kind of snowballed from there. But the biggest thing is mindset. And that's why, I think I became so interested in this work, because the moment when I switched and said, because it used to be like, yeah, I would. It's interesting because if you asked me what I did, tell me about your company, I would have always said, I don't even know how I described it, but I was very hesitant. I was like, I didn't like to tell people I was an agent. And of course, now looking back into it, I'm like, that's why my business wasn't doing very well.
Yeah. You have to believe in yourself for sure all the time, right? And even when they say, when you dream big, dream as if it's today.
Yeah, no, and that's what it's the whole philosophy is: act as if it's happening, or act as if, even if it hasn't yet.
Right.
And that worked for me. It was a game changer, for me.
Absolutely. So you are currently you're using WeWork. Where because with WeWork you can probably have several different locations if you wanted. Where is your main location?
My main location is Herald Square 500. It's like right on 7th Avenue between 37th and 38th.
Nice.
It's one of their biggest locations in Manhattan. And then one of their newer ones. So the membership that I have is I have a private office there. I can most likely, if I were to go to another state, if I wanted to rent, or I would get a discount if I want to rent out a private office, or just even spend some time there in the public area and work if I wanted to. But my primary location, which I've always been at, is on 7th Ave between 37th and 38th, and right near the Macy's.
Yeah, right, because it's so easy for you to get to from New Jersey.
Yeah, because I take the train in.
Yeah.
So Penn Station, it's only maybe a few blocks, so it's less than a 10-minute walk from like Penn Station to my office.
Yeah, it's incredible over there. We do an event called New York City Experience, and we take people to different rooftops and areas, and we have brunches and excursions and all that that happens. We're actually having our next one December 6th and 7th. We'd love for you to be part of it.
Yeah, well, let me know. I'd love to come.
Yeah, we'll talk further after the show. But let me ask you. You said at one point that you kind of like stopped going into the office. Do you go at least once a week, twice a week? It depends. A big client meeting. How do you handle that?
Yeah, client meetings, or if I have other functions to go to in the city, or like if a client says, "Hey, I want to meet in person." Okay, great, we'll do that. Or if I have an event to go to, like a show or a showcase or a dinner meeting, then I'll stay, spend the day at my office, get my mail, do whatever I need to do, because most of the stuff is all virtual. Like I, everything now is electronically. When I pitch actors, it's all electronic. So I can really be anywhere to do that. As long as I have, access to email and phone, which I, 24/7 I do. Right. Everything usually now is, most of my communication with casting directors and producers is email and electronic. I mean, sometimes some phone, but so technically I really don't. I mean, I have to have an office to be and to comply with New York City law as an agent, to be an employee, because that's what I really am, as an employment agent, classified as. So I have to have a physical office location. If we didn't have to do that, I don't think we'd even have it. Most agents wouldn't even have an office anymore.
Right, because everything is digital.
Digital, yeah.
So with that in mind, are you only booking New York City events, Jersey events, or you're booking across the country?
If they're looking in New York, I can book across the country, but mainly New York, New Jersey. There's a lot happening there too. There's a lot of TV shows filming, a lot of theater, Broadway, off-Broadway tours, regional theater.
What would you say is one of the biggest acts that, and you don't necessarily have to mention their name, but that you've cast that you really said, wow, this is truly from it has generated from all the work I've done. This is the one that really made a difference for me.
There were two in 2022 that really stood out for me. One was, I secured an actor on Broadway for the show 1776, which is a Broadway revival. And after a 4-month Broadway run, they did a 12-month tour, national tour. So that was like a biggest win for me in theater. And then in TV wise, I had landed someone a series regular, which means that they're in every episode on an Apple TV series. Which was a huge deal, because that was multiple thousands of dollars right there. Because it was a full-time, production. Now there are a lot of variables outside my control, because, for instance, that series only lasted one season. That was canceled by Apple. So, but initially we had signed a 7-year contract. Where I would have made, even myself, just on commission alone, 6 figures from that, if it would have stood to fruition.
If it went all the way through. So when you do book somebody, do you still get to go to the set and hang out with the actors and
due to security, no.
Not anymore.
Unless the only time I may be able to do that, if it's a kid, like if I want to do like a set inspection, if it's a minor, but most of the time, no, because of security reasons. Very rarely. I mean, now if it's a show, we'll go to usually opening night, or to see them in the audience, at least during the time. This is support for.
Gotcha. So you just brought something up. So what ages do you work with?
I do work with some kids, only a small handful. I mainly work with adults, and I have adults in my roster from, as young as 18 to, as old as 86, 87.
Mm. All right, let's talk about something that a lot of people talk about. A lot of people, it's on the news. It's on page 6 sometimes. Actors who are problems.
Yeah,
The prima donnas, if you will.
absolutely. Well, I mean, one of the things I look for when I secure an actor is usually I'll have like 1 or 2 meetings. I may like their talent, but then I need to have at least 1 or 2 one-on-one meetings with them before I will consider working with them. Because I need to see how you relate to people. Because part of my reputation as an agent is not just finding people who can act, but are you going to be difficult on set or on stage or in backstage? Are you going to be difficult? Because that's going to make me look bad too.
Right.
That's going to be a negative reflection on me if I send somebody who may be a great actor, but they're, a nightmare on set.
Right. Yeah. Right. Do you only work with actors or do you work with singers and dancers and?
Mainly actors, unless they do Broadway, like musical theater style. I don't work with like recording artists or, concert or cabaret singers, unless they're doing like musical theater. But that's like only in a theatrical sense will I work with a singer. Because I'm not a music person at all, and I'm not qualified, to do that. I would refer out, somebody who's looking for.
Let's talk about that. Refer out. When you refer out, do you, as a business professional, do you get referral fees? Do you also have people referring to you? How does that work?
Yeah, we don't get referral fees, but we do have referral networks. Like other talent reps will, if they can't take an actor on or they like an actor they can't take on, they may refer out. I'll get a lot of referrals from like acting coaches and teachers or personal managers. Because there's a difference between an agent and a manager. A manager is more like hands-on and
Right.
looks over the overall career. So I'll get a lot of referrals from managers. I get a lot of referrals from acting teachers, acting coaches. I'll get sometimes referrals from business coaches even.
Mm.
But like I have this actor that's great. And then other actors on my roster will refer their colleagues, their friends, and they'll be like, I have an acting friend who I think, would be great. You'd be great, would be great for. So I get a lot of referrals that way.
Very cool. Very cool. Let me share this with you and then we'll be right back. You followed the rules, tried the restrictions, counted the carbs, the steps, and the failures. You're not lazy, you're exhausted from doing it all without real change. What if the problem isn't you, but the plan? Sifu's Mind-Body Method is a 90-day transformation built on 7 unshakable pillars: mindset, movement, nutrition, hydration, fasting, journaling, and faith. This isn't another shortcut. It's your structure, your strength, your reset. You don't need harder, you need better. Ready to begin? Start today. Yeah. So when we think about moving pictures, if you will, there's so much that goes into these things. I have 2 clients who went on to become actors. One was not too long ago shooting a movie in Australia. Another one did a couple of movies, but then he's going into the production end of it. So he's looking to be a producer and so forth. And he was young when he started. He's now in college doing so. So he's looking at the back end of thing. There's so many moving parts when it comes to entertainment, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
If you had to do it all over again, what would be the one thing that you think you may want to jump into?
I probably would do, as I said earlier, would have been working for somebody else, working for a more established agent, somebody who already been doing this for years, just to kind of even shadow them for a while and
Mm,
see their workflow and tap into the network. That probably what I would. Even though I'm not, I said I really like working for people. I probably would have just said, okay, just do this for a couple of years. Just and because I think that would have benefited me the most. If I could go back, I would do that.
because that would have taken you in a different route, you think?
Yeah. Well, I would have had more connection. I think I would have had a better, faster learning curve.
Right.
I think because again, I was kind of doing things blindly for a while.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what I was doing. I thought I was going through the motions, but I really didn't know completely what I was doing. How to pitch a client effectively, how to get on the phone, or at least have those existing relationships. Because if I worked for an agency, that would have had that
Mm,
by the time. Because I could have then just simply emailed everybody and said, "Hey, I'm on my own now.
right.
You
Yeah.
worked with me here," and I would have already had those relationships.
Mhm. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that happening. So when you think about your life, if you were to go back, you talked about being a bookworm, right? Which I
Mm-hmm.
love. Um, uh, have you considered even writing your own book?
I sure did, and I'm glad you asked that, because I did.
You did write a
Um,
book.
yeah, I did write a book in 2024, and I'm writing a couple more now.
Nice.
But um, and I think that was one of the most pivotal moments in my life. Was last year was publishing a book. And holding it in my hands, because being someone who reads a lot of books, to actually hold one in my hands.
Right. It's a big difference. It's a big moment for you, right?
Hmm.
What was your book about?
It's called Rise Above the Script, and it deals with actors and self-sabotage. So one of the things, and this is what I did my doctoral dissertation on. So it's kind of based on that. I just kind of added to it and made it more readable and relatable.
Mm, very cool. Very cool. So you said you're considering writing more books. Are they also based for the industry or mindset?
They're on mindset. But these are a little bit different. I mean, the book that I wrote the first time is mainly geared towards actors, although anybody can benefit from it because I do include strategies for overcoming self-sabotage and self-doubt,
Mm,
um, which kind of plagues everybody, on certain degrees.
right.
Um, the next book I'm going to deal with, because it's something I dealt with my most of my life, was people pleasing,
Mm,
and self-sacrifice, like being a martyr. And that was like one of my themes, growing up, and I'm writing a book. That's my next book on that. Breaking free, like from the martyr complex. I mean,
mm,
I'm playing on the title there.
right, right.
Um, and then I'm going to do another book. The third book I'm planning is on gaslighting, because I've in business and personal. So um, those are my next two books
Mm,
projects.
very cool. That's going to be an interesting one. Gaslighting.
It sure is, yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Um, when you take on a client now, what is the biggest? And I know you talked about making sure that you meet them, that their character is someone you want to work with. But what's some of the questions that you ask to determine those, to determine who they are?
Well, number one, I asked them just, first interview question, which is what everybody kind of asks, is tell me about yourself. What I often ask with an actor is like, what type do they see themselves at? Where do they, how would, if you were to cast yourself, how would you, do that? What type of roles would you say? Because I want to get an idea. Does an actor know their brand? Do they know their own archetype? In a sense, do they know their character? Do they know themselves? I'll ask them what their goals are, what's their plan in the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. Because the one thing I definitely value there is longevity. Since I started, I've been doing this for 21 years now, ultimately working with actors, and I can tell you there's a high turnover rate. Where there's a lot of actors who do this for a couple of years and then quit. And it's kind of a interesting situation because they'll drop almost 6 figures into an acting training program only to give up within less than 5 years of professional acting afterwards. So the one thing I look for is longevity. Where do you really, what's your 5-10 year plan?
Because you hear a lot of actors, and I know some who went to Hollywood. They said, I'm going to give it a year, and if it doesn't pan out, then I'm out. But if they would have given it maybe 2 years, maybe they would have gotten the roles.
Yeah. Well, usually I'm going to say it takes, I would say, even more than that, realistically, I would say at least you need to give yourself at least 5 or 10 years, minimum, the bare minimum, before even making a decision like that. If you want to be effective, because there are some actors that I know that finally made their big break, but they've been, working for 10, 15 years.
Right. And then they're called overnight success, right?
Yeah. It took them 15 years to become an overnight success. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what's often a lot of times not really addressed or understood by people not in the industry is that you may have heard like somebody all of a sudden become a breakout star, but they were working behind the scenes for 10, 15 years,
right.
Hustling, as an actor. You just didn't know them yet.
So how important is it for you to find out if they have a SAG card or not?
That's not necessarily important right away because, to be quite honest with you, can get a SAG card from doing background work to being an extra. And that doesn't mean, that you can act.
Right.
So I'm not too terribly concerned about that. Now, if they do have a SAG card, the one thing I definitely look for, do they have roles with speaking credits?
Right.
Because if they, because I used to get a lot of like resumes that were like 3 or 4 pages long, but every one of those were like, pedestrian number 4 or,
right.
patron at the bar. And while that is important to build experience, and a lot of SAG actors do that for insurance, I get that, I understand that, but it's not acting. Like anybody can really do that.
Right.
To just sit, and be kind of like art, background art, and so the SAG card isn't entirely important to me, although that's the end goal. Because you can work, and an actor can work in I think it's like right now 3 SAG productions with principal credits before they have to get their card. And I've hired a lot, gotten a lot of actors that were non-union hired on, SAG TV shows, or movies.
Right.
So that the SAG card isn't entirely important to me, right initially.
So, as an agent, Dr. Albert, do you have dues that are that you have to pay into some film organization or anything like that?
We have to pay. We don't now. No, we don't pay as the SAG or anything like that. We do have to pay to be bonded. Like bonded and insurance. So I have to pay insurance. I have to pay for a bond. Because I don't pay this amount, but we have to get at least a $10,000 bond. Just again in case like things happen. So, and we have to get liability insurance. So that's, and then of course I have overhead. I got to pay for rent. I got to pay other, phone expenses, internet expenses, so those sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. We have one more quick commercial, and then we'll be right back.
The city never sleeps, and neither do the dreamers who build its pulse. From every corner of the globe they come. Visionaries, creators, leaders, each carrying a spark ready to ignite the world. This is not an event. It's a revolution of rhythm and reason. A symphony of minds. A movement of momentum. Sifu Rafael, Lancelot, Jose Escobar. Together they set the stage for brilliance. This is the NYC experience. Mastermind, light up the city. They coming from the east, coming from the west. Knowledge on deck, put the truth to the test. Leaders in motion, hearts in sync, dropping wisdom so deep it'll make you think. They bring stories, sweat and flame, different faces, one shared name. Elevation, that's the sound. NYC experience mastermind, where purpose is found.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, that's what's happening December 6th and 7th. So anybody who's interested, I'm going to throw a QR code up on top. You can always take your phone and just check it out. Go to the website.
Yeah, go for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. We just got a new speaker this morning, Big D, and he's a profound speaker, so we're excited for that as well.
That's amazing. And you know, and that leads me to another point too, as masterminds and getting with a good crowd and a good tribe. Because success as anything as entrepreneurs and actors really determined based on, you know, the company that you keep and who you associate with.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So something changed here. That's not what I meant to do. So when you think about red carpet events, is that important for you to go to them?
It depends on the caliber of it, because really anybody can rent a red carpet, and an organization can rent a red carpet.
Right.
So not necessarily. I mean, it's nice to do it if it's a national scale or really good award ceremony, but no, I don't. You know, I don't look at it like that. I mean, that's a nice metric to have, but again, it's, are you at the end of the day doing what you love? Are you being successful? So the red carpet is a bonus, but I don't think it should be a necessity, you know, for anybody really.
Yeah, gotcha. I fully understand that part. When you start looking at getting an actor for a role, what are the things that you look for in the role so that you understand which actor that you want to present? Because if you present an actor that's not going to really fulfill that part, that company may not want to work with you, right?
Of course.
Well, you're constantly bringing the wrong people.
Yeah, well, because it's like, okay, then I'm just shooting spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks, which is not what anybody wants in a talent rep. Particularly, like, you know, I'll look for the type of role, what's the heart of the role, and, you know, like if it's a cop, you know, can that actor really fulfill it? Can I see them really being a cop? Or are they too soft? Are they too, you know, not realistic? Or if they're playing a doctor, you know, I'm not going to submit a blue collar guy or gal for a doctor. You know, that's just not gonna work. They may be the right age and type, right age and ethnicity, but that doesn't mean, you know, can they fully play a doctor? You know, like, and you know, I'll even use my imagination. Can I see them playing a doctor? And you know, one thing I like when I pitch actors for roles, one thing I like to do, kind of say is like, it's about quality, not quantity. And you know, even if I just have one person, or sometimes I'll get a request and I'll say, like, I'll be flat out honest with the guy, you know, I don't have anybody that matches that. You know, like, I'd rather have that and say, oh yeah, I have 5 people that I hope, you know, cross my fingers, you know, because that's not going to look good. Because my job is to make their job easier.
Correct. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
not harder, so I don't want to do that.
Dr. Albert, I want to thank you for a great conversation today. I really, really appreciate your time, taking the time to being on a coaching call.
Of
What
course.
what I'd love right now is to get people to connect with you, to reach out to you. What could they expect when they go to Albert, your last name, right?
Yeah,
Bramante.com. What can they
right now you're gonna see right now we're under construction, but you're gonna see like my some recordings that I have, meditation recordings that you can buy, and then it's gonna have a link to my socials and a little bit about me, and that's pretty much what you'll get. And it's really way to get in touch with me, so and feel free to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Everybody make sure, listen, if you need an agent, I know a guy. I know a
Thank
guy.
you, Sifu.
Yes, sir. My pleasure. Do me a favor, hang out while we say goodbye to everybody. Everybody have yourself an exceptional day, and you need to share this show with somebody who needs to hear it, right? Maybe you did, maybe you have to hear it again. Watch the replay and hit hashtag replay, right? Let us know that you were here, what you thought of the show, what you thought of this particular episode, and then share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Thank you, everybody. Have an exceptional rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Take care.